This is Technically Legal, a podcast about legal technology, innovation in the legal industry, and the impact tech is having on the law. I'm Chad Main, the founder of legal services company Percipient, and on today's show, I'm talking to Brandon Epstein, who's the Chief Forensic Officer for Medex. That's a digital forensic tool that helps unearth metadata from video files so they can be authenticated for legal purposes and to help identify doctored videos and deepfakes. When a representative for Medex reached out about getting today's guest on the show, my interest was piqued. That's because one of the things we do at Percipient is help out legal teams with internal investigations or inquiries that arise when an employee jumps ship for a competitor and there's a worry that the employee took company information with them when they left. Part of these investigations require digital forensics, which usually involves the collection of text messages, app information, emails, and data like that. But what about collecting and verifying the authenticity of a digital video file? That's where Medex comes in. And on today's show, I'm talking to Brandon Epstein, who's the Chief Forensic Officer for Medex. Medex is a purpose-built forensic tool for use in legal proceedings. As we will hear Brandon explain, the type of hardware used to create digital file leaves its own fingerprint. For instance, by taking a look at the bits and bytes of a video file, Medex can tell you whether the file was created by an iPhone or maybe a Samsung device. Brian uses bricklaying as an analogy. He says that every video file is comprised of bricks, but there's no rule as to the order in which those bricks must be laid. So the brick wall created in an Apple file looks different than one created on an Android device. And that's how Medex is able to tell you what type of device created the file. Brandon got his start in law enforcement as a patrol officer. And through that work, he became acutely aware of the importance of video evidence in helping to solve crimes. And that's when the digital forensics bug caught him. Fast forward a few years later, and he met Medex's CEO at a conference. They hit it off, and Brandon was asked to come aboard. As they say, the rest is history.
So you and I have something in common I thought was interesting. I'm also an alumni of UCD. I went to the University of Colorado Denver. That's where I got my undergrad.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah.
Did you end up there because of that program, the specialized program?
Specifically, only program like it, at least in the United States. I had met the two professors there, Cataline Gregoris and Jeff Smith at the time, through the scientific working group in digital evidence, SWIG-DE. And at the time when I met them, I had a high school education. I remember sitting there over drinks one night saying, I'm going back to college to finish my degree and I will be your student one day. I remember Jeff kind of laughed at me and I turned around and I did it. And it was a blast. It was a really cool program. They were doing some really fantastic stuff.
Was that in person or was that remote?
It's a hybrid program. So it's basically almost 2.5 years with a thesis, but you're supposed to go out 4 times to campus. Of course, I started school in 2019. So got 2 trips out there, then COVID robbed us of some in-person experiences, but we got through it.
So when you did go out to campus, how long was the stint?
So one was 3 days and the other one was 7 days.
Okay.
So there were 2 3-day trips and then 2 7-day trips. So I got half of it in.
That's cool. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah,
so
it was awesome.
You get your degree there later in your career. You started out in law enforcement. You're a patrolman, right?
I started out as a patrolman in 2007 at a municipal police agency in New Jersey. So city of New Brunswick was just like almost smack in the middle of the state.
Was that something you always wanted to do? Did you always want to be a cop or?
Maybe a little bit toward later in life. And it was a great job. I thoroughly enjoyed my time there. Still some of my closest friends to this day were guys that I rode in a radio car with and went to the police academy with almost 20 years ago.
How long were you patrolling?
So I was a patrolman in the city of New Brunswick for about 4.5 years. After that, I went to, street crimes, a proactive policing unit. And then from there, I got injured for a little bit and was on light duty in our major crimes unit. And then I just ended up staying in major crimes, working as a case detective for a while before getting into digital evidence, digital forensics.
And how did you get into digital evidence? Where's the jump?
So the jump was in 2014, really. At the time, we were getting inundated with digital video. Every case was starting to have that important role of video evidence. I kind of complained enough to the bosses to say, we need a better way to deal with this. We were ill-prepared, ill-trained, and had, for lack of a better term, poor understanding of what we were doing. And they said, all right, enough complaining about it, go figure it out. So we took some forfeiture money. I went online. I called a whole bunch of people that I saw were doing this kind of work. I had ended up in my first video forensics class, and I was off to the races from there.
What types of evidence was like? What were the videos? Like, give me some context.
So in the major crimes instance, we're dealing a lot with people that had black box digital video recorder systems in their houses. Today, we're all familiar with Ring doorbells and Arlo cameras and Nest cameras. Back in the early 2000s and 2010s, was really when it was burgeoning out to digital video recorders in people's homes. And a lot of times it was not so much, it would be great if, that captured actually crimes on there, but a lot of it being an urban area of New Jersey would capture people's movements as a suspect went to a crime or left the crime after, whether it be a violent crime, crime on person, property crime, robbery, whatever it may be. Video told that story that we were missing.
Ultimately, you ended up at Medex.
Yep.
I think I read somewhere that you met the CEO here at some conference in UCLA, a digital forensics conference.
So that was, probably about 2015, 2016. I went really far down the rabbit hole of drank the Kool-Aid of using video evidence and digital evidence, not only for identifying offenders or identifying suspects and prosecuting offenders, because it was so powerful. And I really try to find everything I could out about that to better myself and better serve our community. The course of that, I'd met a colleague who was teaching out at UCLA, a class for basically in the Library Information Science School, how to manage police evidence, digital evidence. And it was there that I'd met at a body cam symposium through the professor at UCLA, one of her mutual friends, who's Bert Lyons, who is the CEO of Medex now. Bert was at a previous company, but he had zero law enforcement experience, and it just so happened that him and I and a few other people got to talking, and I realized that this guy that was doing some contract work for the FBI, doing some training, but had digital asset management and archivist background, knew far and away more than anybody had ever talked to in the law enforcement space about digital video, and we kept in touch since.
Did you go straight from working on the police force to Medex?
Actually, right now, for the next, probably measured in hours by now, I'm about to retire. I'm no longer working in the New Brunswick Police Department. I work for a prosecutor's office in New Jersey. I have a few days left here until Medex becomes my full-time job. But over the past 3 years, I've been burning the candles at both ends.
You mentioned that Brett was working with the FBI. That's where Medex was born, right? He had an FBI gig. He saw a use case here that just didn't exist and created the tool, right?
Bert was designing some training classes based upon his knowledge, deep knowledge about how video is encoded, how the ones and zeros work in a digital video file. And in building that training out, he was building sample sets and sample data and started seeing things in those training files that say, hey, we're not effectively leveraging this third dimension of video evidence. So everybody was looking at what we see on a screen. Everybody was looking at pixel values, metadata values, but very few people had acknowledged the fact that the way that those values are stored or how it's structured in a video file can be exploited or can be examined to get some really deep insight. It had been acknowledged a little bit, but Bert had really the novel idea of how to do it at scale, how to compare against a wide variety of files. And that's really where the product development aspect came from.
You said that you guys dig deeper. It's not just metadata. It's not just looking at the video file. Your analogy is bricks. You build a house with bricks, but you analyze how the bricks are built and what bricks you use, and that's kind of how your software works. So explain how Medex uses that kind of brick analogy to analyze video files.
I use the analogy, and I've been trying to come up with a better one, but I think that this one still resonates. It still works. If I were to build a brick wall, right? We all have building codes where we sit. The building code says that for each of these bricks, these imaginary bricks, let's think of, that each individual brick has to have certain aspects to it, very rigid requirements, saying that the brick has to say how big it is, has to say what function it is, whether it's a load-bearing brick, it's a window-supporting brick, or has electricity run through it. That's based upon our building code. But our building code also allows me to be very flexible in which order and which placement I use of those bricks. So if I were to build a wall, if Brandon builds a wall and it uses specific types of bricks and in a certain order, when Chad walks down the street, and if you know the way that Brandon builds walls, you could look over and say, hey, I know Brandon built that wall because I recognize the order in which he used specific bricks in a specific order. Take it out of the brick building wall analogy, and we do the same thing at digital video files. We deploy basically our own custom parser, part of the software that basically interprets or reads every byte, every individual piece of data within the video file to basically identify that brick wall, to identify exactly how that is built. Because we're dealing with hardware encoding or basically software encoding or digital encoding, computers will do the same work the same way as they're programmed every time to encode video file that way. What we recognize, what Bert recognized during the product development, is that we could attribute those patterns, that brick pattern in the video specifications called boxes or objects, those patterns back to specific video creation. So an Apple iPhone 13, that brick pattern, that box pattern will look different than a Samsung A20, which will look different than a LG Stylo, different type of cell phone. But to push the issue a little further, you also realize that if I take my video file and I transmit it from my iPhone 13 to that Samsung A20, and I use a third-party app like WhatsApp or Signal or even a social media site to an extent, I can look at that structure of the resultant video and establish provenance, regardless of what it looks like or regardless of the actual metadata values that absolutely change. It's pretty finicky how easily metadata changes, but the arrangement of those boxes or those bricks can be attributed back to a specific provenance chain, whether it be iPhone 13 that is passed through WhatsApp or LG Stylo 5 that has been edited by Premiere Pro, which refreshingly a deterministic matter. It either matches or it doesn't.
So as you're saying is Apple, if I record a video on Apple, it records differently than an Android device or the Google Pixel device or whatever. So there's a way, in your analogy, the bricks, the way they lay their bricks is a different way than the Google Pixel does.
Exactly.
And that's how you identify. You go at that byte level and identify, okay, this video, I can tell by the way, the order of these bits and bytes, it's an Apple video and it's not a Google video. But then you say you can also figure out whether or not it was uploaded to WhatsApp or social media, whatever program. How is that? Does it keep some of the same attributes as the original Apple brick wall? And then the WhatsApp adds its own little brick wall to it?
So I will note that as we talk about these bricks and we talk about how Apple encodes versus or produces a video file versus other, let's say, Samsung devices, all of it that we're talking about here at that structural level, at that binary, the ones and zeros level, is done absent the user interaction. That's something that, in cases of Apple or Samsung, that's a hardware encoder. That's a piece of hardware that is built in that. We can't go into any setting on our iPhone or our Samsung and control the order in which that wall is built, completely outside the user control. Now, what we've recognized and what our research has shown and proven is that even though that arrangement of wall A in my Apple device is sent through WhatsApp and creates wall B, right? If I have a wall C that is sent through WhatsApp from, let's say I have an Android device that has originally wall C, gets sent through WhatsApp, that is not the same as wall B. That is now wall D. It changes the arrangement of those boxes, but it does such in a way that is specific to, let's say, Android creation and then sent through that platform. So an Android wall will behave differently that is sent through those platforms as what an iPhone wall will behave with, and that can be linked back.
And can you figure out granularly, like if you just start with the original file, like if you just grab it from somebody's phone, you can clearly see, it was from an Apple iPhone 13. But what you're saying is then if that video is loaded into social media like WhatsApp, if it's an Apple generated video, it's going to be different than an Android based video. But once it is uploaded to that second level up to social media, are you able to still figure out, it was an Apple iPhone 13. That was the OS that it was made on?
Essentially, yes. Obviously, there's a lot of variables there. How many times it's been passed around before it's been uploaded to, in this case, WhatsApp, the specific device that it is. But for the most part, yes, it is able to link that back through provenance. I will say this, and it's a pretty common misconception, even in the digital forensic space. People look at that resultant WhatsApp video and say, WhatsApp stripped that metadata. WhatsApp removed that metadata. WhatsApp changed that metadata. In reality, I think it's beneficial for us to think probably a little more accurately and shift our mindset that WhatsApp didn't strip our metadata, didn't scrub our metadata. WhatsApp created its own video file. It took our video file that we sent to it, ingested it, and then produced a resultant video that's optimized for transmission on WhatsApp. All that metadata that is present there is created by WhatsApp. However, in looking at that, some of it may coincidentally or maybe not coincidentally be the same as the original. Maybe the resolution, the height and width of that video is the same, but that's because it chose to create a new video with that same resolution. Those changes can be linked back structurally to source device, even though that metadata, the semantic or descriptive or administrative metadata values have changed.
Explain the distinction there between the metadata that's inherent in a video file versus the brick wall, the bits that Medex is looking at.
To put it succinctly, and we talk about this and we're just training for the past couple of days, some new users, and it's a concept of metadata is pretty fickle. So let's say I edit a video file. I can edit that video file, and you can look and see that, use, let's say, a commercial tool like Adobe Premiere Pro. There may be metadata that says Adobe Premiere Pro in that metadata. Likely, that probably not the best example. It's not going to be completely obvious. However, I can then manipulate that metadata, or I could change the metadata to remove a lot of the notation of any Adobe encoding there. And I showed in a presentation, it's not all that hard to ask ChatGPT to say, can you please tell me how to change the metadata in this video file to make it appear like a Samsung Galaxy Note 9 camera original video? And ChatGPT will spit out, here's the software you can use to do it. Here's the program. This is the command you need to run to produce those metadata values. Now, what we can't change is that video file structure. Because Adobe encodes a certain way, because Apple encodes a certain way, because generative AI encodes a specific way and uses its own encoding, it's entirely too complex. It's unrealistic to think that we can manipulate structure and either do it without detection and appear like camera original video, or do it in such a way that doesn't break the file that it won't play back.
When we come back in just a couple minutes, Brandon explains why changing metadata in a video file is often harder than people think, and how Medex is used to identify deepfakes. I'm Chad Main, and you're listening to Technically Legal.
We need to do more with less. That is the key takeaway nowadays from almost every survey of in-house counsel. But what if it didn't have to be that way? What if you actually could do more for less? By combining legal expertise and technology, Percipient enables legal teams to get more work done for less. Buried in contracts and sales is frustrated with turnaround time? We can help with that. Did you just get hit with a subpoena and reviewing 100,000 documents and files will tax your resources or cost you a small fortune in billable hours? We can help there too. Our team of legal professionals leverage tech and project management principles with the right amount of human oversight to deliver precise, efficient, and cost-effective legal solutions. Whether it's legal operations and contract management support, subpoena compliance, or document review, Percipient is your partner in really doing more for less. Percipient. Legal services powered by technology.
All right, we'll get back to my conversation with Brandon Epstein in just a second, but before I do, I want to direct you to tlpodcast.com. At that website, you'll find an episode page for this episode and every other episode we've done in the past, with links to more information about our guests and more information about some of the stuff we talk about. If you want to get a hold of me, you can find me on X, LinkedIn, or email me at cmain@percipient.co. That's C-M-A-I-N at percipient.co. All right, let's get back to my conversation with Brandon Epstein.
You know, I thought was interesting doing the research for the program today, the presentation you did. I thought this was interesting. If you have a video file, let's just say you change, like you go on there and change the date of the video creation, that's fine, but your software will enable you to figure out that it was still manipulated, because that's not the only place that date is stored. There's like inherently in the file, there's several different places that store the date that the video was taken.
Exactly. I think we take it for granted a lot. We watch so much video, whether it be sports and TV at night, streaming television shows, or just video conferencing, that it's visual. It's a visual medium. It's easy to understand. In reality, from a forensic approach, there are so many intricacies in stored and recorded video that many of us don't understand. And actually, even the people that are programming or developing these software encoders, because they're computer programmers, I wouldn't expect them to understand the intricacies of video production. They grab what works off the shelf, plug it in, and use it. In reality, there's a tremendous amount of intricacy and a lot of interrelational aspects of a digital video file that we could exploit or we could use to see if things have been changed. So yeah, I might have a little bit of skill in a hex editor to go and change a date and timestamp, but unless I know where all the other 6 date and timestamps are in that video file, we'll be able to pick that up.
So let's talk about the use cases. You know, on the website, you offer a few. One is for law enforcement, authenticate citizen-submitted video to identify which are original files, which are not. Use it to develop leads. There's some interesting use cases there. To prove what the evidence is reliable, just like we're talking about, right? To authenticate that this video file is authentic and hasn't been manipulated. The last thing is really cool, is identifying deepfakes.
We have a good mix between law enforcement government users, ones that are introducing evidence in court. I think that's really important to drive home here, is that Medex was a purpose-built forensic tool for use in legal proceedings. And I think that's where our users really identify with, is because this isn't in a black box. We will show reliability of our data. It's explainable data and stuff that people are confident about introducing in court. The reliability and explainability aspect is key for our user base, especially those that work in the justice and public safety sector that have to introduce evidence in court. We also have private examiners, basically in private practice, private digital forensic examiners that do both civil, criminal, prosecution, defense work that have significant interest in authenticating media. And we also have a lot of news media clients and users that are concerned with, and rightfully so, making sure that tips or videos that they source are truly accurate and proving that accuracy, or proving that, I should say, that authenticity. So yes, those are all valid use cases of how we're currently deploying Medex.
And I saw a cool case study in the war in Ukraine. I think there were videos that were being sent that people were skeptical that they were actually from the Ukraine, but you guys figured out that they were.
Yeah, what we really get involved with there is, and that's a great example of a distinct need to prove authenticity. A lot of times, and a lot of users come to us because they're concerned with synthetic media, deepfakes, detecting AI generative media. And the greater concern right now, as we stand today, in May 2024, if you're asking me, the working in the space, it is detecting deepfakes from a disinformation standpoint. That's one aspect. But in justice, public safety, and the legal community, we're really faced right now. We see our users and we see new users and attorneys coming to us all the time with, I need to prove authenticity. I need to prove that this video is truly what it purports to be, because either opposing counsel has claimed that this is a deepfake, this is synthetic, and now the onus is on me to actually show that it is not. It has not been edited. This is true camera original. We see this a lot in child sexual abuse material prosecutions, internet crimes against children cases, where the claim is that that video is synthetic. There's not a real trial, therefore there's no real victim. That kind of parallels the exact use case that you're talking about from Ukraine, is that this video was staged, or I say staged is probably not the best word. This video is not authentic. It has been edited to show a different interpretation of it. And by using Medex to say that, no, this video, and I might be just grabbing a scenario off the top of my head, is, no, this video was actually generated from Telegram. We can attribute this back to a camera original iPhone video. I used to joke with Bert during the initial stages of the war in the Ukraine, and we were doing a lot of this work. You know, a lot of the videos were posted to Telegram, and a lot of them were posted from President Zelensky's account and from his, who's ever managing that account. I said that Bert had a quasi-dating relationship with, because he were able to identify in Telegram whether he was using, and almost down to whether he's in the office or after hours, a MacBook to post those videos versus his iPhone to post videos, and it could, almost down to the minute, saying, all right, he's on the MacBook for this one. It's after hours. He's on the iPhone for that one. That's the kind of context that our users like that are looking for, that we could provide.
So let's talk about that. You're looking for deepfakes there to make sure that it's real. And it's going to be very prevalent now with the AI advances there. Are you able to detect it? Because let's say I use a piece of AI software to make a video of Trump or Biden or whatever. You're able to tell that that's a deepfake because that software lays the bricks versus the way the iPhone would lay the bricks?
Exactly. As a deepfake creation tool or algorithm, we don't live in that pixel, that content space. No matter how good your deepfake is, no matter how good your generative media is, or even how poor it is or how poor quality it is, at the end of the day, we still need to encode that video. We still need to build those bricks. So I could build a deepfake here, and I could send it to California and have it played back on a Windows computer. Every video file has to be encoded. I still have to make that MP4, that MOV, that AVI file. That's where we live. Because Apple, and it's their intellectual property, their hardware that produces their structural signature, that arrangement of bricks, is completely different than the underlying encoders that Deepfakes Web, Reface, Face Swap, Sora, Dolly, Runway, any of those deepfake encoding tools will not look structurally like a Apple camera original, Samsung camera original, LG camera original, whatever. We can go on and on with the list. And we deterministically say that, regardless of what we try to have the actual metadata values say.
Do you think AI will ever be such that I can go into, I'll just use Chat GPT or whatever, Dolly or whatever. I don't know if Dolly makes videos, but could it ever be such that I say, hey, make a deep fake of Donald Trump talking about XYZ and make it look like it came from an iPhone? Could AI get that smart?
That's a great question. At least right now in the near future, we're not going to have the encoding tools to do it because Apple owns that encoding. Apple owns that hardware encoding. Unless you're going to build a knockoff Apple hardware encoder to do that, and I'm hoping that Apple will probably take exception to you doing that and kind of stealing their IP to do so. That would be the barrier to doing so. We also have some other future development that will help combat that from a more holistic approach. But right now, I don't see that as a realistic possibility, at least in the near future.
Let's keep with Apple because we're talking about Apple. When they're developing this hardware and the software that runs the hardware, are they purposely coding it such that the bricks are laid this way, or is it just how it works because it's just the way the code is?
It's interesting you said that. Right now, I mean, obviously, I have not had any conversations with the people that are building the encoding in Apple, but from our interpretation here is that's they're optimizing for the best way for them to encode video with. I don't think that the structural analysis for a forensic aspect is on their radar. I will say that we do have one file creation provider, to speak vaguely, that is exploring the use case of I want to create with the ability to show provenance in mind structurally, which is a pretty unique idea, especially when it comes time to talk about attribution to sources or disinformation online, or even as we start producing generative media, how to say that I produce that generative media that's my content versus someone else's.
They're just trying to make a phone and a user experience that will sell phones, right? This wasn't something they thought about, but it's going to become more important as we have advances in technology and AI where you need to figure out where something came from.
All providers right now, or all manufacturers are concerned with, I want to encode efficient, fast, high quality video. I think the provenance is second. There are efforts to include some content credentialing or some provenance information about that at the hardware level. It's starting to get some traction now and some buy-in. The issue is there, unless the entire lifespan or life cycle of that, everybody buys into it. So the Apples of the world, the Adobes of the world, which already have bought into it, Twitter, unless everybody supports this effort, we'll lose those values. We'll lose that ability as video files get moved and passed around. The nice thing about Medex is Apple doesn't have to do that right now because we have the ability to take your Apple video or known camera original video, and we could turn it into a credential compliant format. So we could inject those provenance identifying information in video once we independently prove that it is camera original.
Brandon, appreciate your time. If people want to learn more about Medex, get a hold of you, where do you want to send them?
Medexforensics.com, or reach out to me directly, Brandon@medexforensics.com. Look forward to any future conversations. Obviously, always happy to talk about it. Getting me to shut up's the hard part. Thank you very much, Chad. Really appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to you for a bit.
Okay, that's a wrap for today's episode. As always, we really appreciate you listening. If you want to subscribe, you can find us on most major podcast platforms like Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, etc. Also, if you like us enough, I hope you leave us a favorable review. Thanks again for listening. Until next time, this has been Technically Legal.